Hello and welcome back to the Single Today podcast. My name is Ryan Wekenman and this is episode 15. It's called Dealing with Disappointment. Have you ever felt or experienced any disappointment on your own singleness journey? If so, this episode is for you because dealing with that disappointment is a huge part of learning how to conquer yesterday's regrets and ditch tomorrow's worries so you can thrive right where you are, which of course is the subtitle of my book, Single Today, which I am so proud of and grateful that so many of you are going through and responding to. And thank you for joining us for this podcast. It's fun because this is episode 15. And at the beginning of this year, I set the goal for myself as I was figuring out how to promote Single Today to do 15 episodes of a Single Today podcast. And so I thought this would be the end of the journey. And I got here and realized I have so much more to say. And so we're going to keep this party going. This is episode 15, but it won't be the last episode. Now, dealing with disappointment. It's a huge part of the journey, right? Because when you are single, oftentimes that means you went through some disappointment from the past. And when you don't confront that disappointment from yesterday, it makes it hard to be content and live an abundant life today. But also, when you don't deal with that disappointment, you will find yourself subconsciously trying to guard yourself from future disappointment by playing small today. And so there's both sides to this coin. We have to learn how to deal with our disappointment so we can let go of the past, but also so that we don't live so afraid of what God may have for us in the future, meaning stepping into all He's created for us and all He's created us to be today. And so we've got a lot of work to do. I want to give you 5 steps for dealing with your disappointment today. Disappointment, my working definition is just when an expectation or a hope goes unfulfilled. And single people, you know this, you've experienced this. Being single is not for the faint of heart, especially for those of you who are pursuing a relationship and trying to date right now. That area, that sphere comes with a lot of disappointment because you meet someone and you feel like, man, maybe this person, maybe there's some potential here. Then you put in all the work to try to connect with them. And then along the way, you realize, oh, for any number of reasons, they're not going to be a good fit. Or maybe they realize that about you. And then you both drive home feeling disappointed. Dealing with that disappointment is crucial. Because if you just sort of shove it under the rug and pretend like it's not there, then it's going to either paralyze you as you continue to move forward in this journey, or it's going to come out in all sorts of different and unhealthy ways. And so I feel like, let's just name this up top. When it comes to being single, there's like the disappointment in yourself, right? Feeling like you're not enough and like, man, if I had just been better at this or more efficient at that, or if I had more money, or if I was more attractive or whatever, maybe I would have a relationship by now. So it's disappointment with yourself. Then it's also dealing with feeling like other people are disappointed in you. If you are single, man, you know this, like the societal pressure, right? The pressure from your friends, from your family. Even if you have an incredible group of friends and family, there's at some level some expectations that you will meet someone, and when you don't, you feel, whether it's verbalized or not, like they are disappointed in you. So there's you being disappointed in you. There's you feeling like other people are disappointed in you. And then if you're honest enough, maybe you have some disappointment that you are feeling towards God. If you have been praying over and over and over again, God, I want to be married. God, would you highlight my future spouse for me? God, would you help me become the type of person, the person I want to be with would want to be with? And yet, so far as of today, you still haven't met that person. It's really hard not to start to feel a little disappointed in the whole journey, even disappointed with God at times. And so what I want to do is very simply give you 5 steps. How do we deal with this disappointment? How do we allow ourselves to go through the grieving process that's necessary to just be honest with the disappointment and feel it and let it run its course so that we can get back in the game tomorrow. So, step one for dealing with disappointment, the first thing you got to do is you got to name the disappointment. And I mean, like, give it a specific, not just, well, I feel disappointed, but name the exact circumstance that made you feel disappointed. Name the exact expectation that went unmet. Name the exact thing that person said or the exact event that happened. Like, write it out on a piece of paper, right? Step one, name the disappointment, and then just jot down every single detail you can think of about what happened and why it's made you so disappointed. So in the book, I tell a story in chapter 4 about a conversation I had with my friend Sally, and it was right before a youth event that I was speaking at. We were in the lobby, and we were having a conversation, and then a bunch of cars show up and start dropping their kids off, and this high schooler runs up to us, barges into our conversation, and says, "My boyfriend just broke up with me, but I don't care." And we start kind of like looking at each other like we're about to get thrown into some high school drama. This is great. And then she continues. She goes, "I don't care. He said that he wants to see other people, but I don't care." That was it. And then she ran off. And Sally, so wise, this has become like a refrain that goes through the entire book. She goes, "I don't care. I don't care. I think that means she cares." And then she walked off to go talk to her, right? But I've thought about that moment for so long, because if you're anything like me, sometimes it's difficult to really like identify and name the thing that we're actually disappointed in. It's almost like a coping mechanism to just push it down and ignore it and pretend like it's not there. Well, one of the best ways to find that thing is it's the thing you're busy pretending like you don't care about. And so for me, I've learned to make this a tool. Anytime I find myself saying I don't care, especially when I repeat it, I don't care, that means that I actually do care about that thing. Or maybe it's fine is another equivalent of it. Oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's probably a pretty good indication that you actually do care about that thing that's going on. So I experienced some disappointment in January of this year. Something happened, expectation that I had that fell through, and that was 4.5, 5 months ago. I'm recording this in May, and just last week, a friend of mine asked me about that situation, like, "Hey, how are you feeling about that?" And immediately I just go, "Oh, it's fine." Like, it's fine. No, like, healthy amount of time there to respond in a mature way, just an immediate reaction. It's fine. And then in my mind, I go, "Oh no, uh-oh. I said that way too quick," which probably means I'm too busy trying to convince myself that I don't actually care about it. Probably means I still have some bitterness or some disappointment that I need to heal from, right? Now, when this happens to you, no shame, no condemnation. We're past that. That's not helpful at all, right? Just a healthy reminder, oh, this thing is still down here. This disappointment is still down there. Lord, thank you for highlighting that, for illuminating that to me. I want to spend some time naming this disappointment and talking about why I feel so disappointed. I'm thinking right now, as I record this, about the prodigal son story in Luke 15. There's this verse. If you don't know the story, younger son gets his inheritance early, goes off, spends it on reckless living, and runs out of money and ends up sleeping with pigs in this pig trough, and like getting to a very dark place in his life. And then there's this verse that says something along the lines of, when he came to his senses. And like, at first when you read that, you think, man, that must have been like such an awful moment when he looked around and thought, what am I doing right now? And it probably was in the moment. But if you think about it, that moment is actually an incredible gift, because without that moment, he would just continue living that same lifestyle. And so that moment of wait a second, what am I doing? That's actually a beautiful gift from God. It's like he's illuminating, he's turning the lights on to help you see that this thing has been destroying your life. Well, it's the same thing with realizing that there's some disappointment in your life that you're busy pretending like you don't care about. I don't care. I don't care. Hey, I think that means you care. And so, step one is simply just to name that thing that you are disappointed about with as much detail as possible. Now, step two is to give yourself space to feel the disappointment. Your disappointment is valid. I'm going to say that again. Your disappointment is valid. You got to get that. When you're afraid to give disappointment space, you're not going to let yourself heal from it. If you want to heal from it, you got to be willing to feel it. And if you want to feel it, you have to understand that it's valid, it's justified. Like you had an expectation and it wasn't met. Of course, that's justified. What I do, maybe you can resonate with this, is I will immediately try to explain it away or justify it away. And what I'll say is, well, there's so many other people in the world dealing with so much harder stuff. And that's true, right? But that doesn't mean that my disappointment isn't important. Like, of course it is. And for as long as I just explain it away, like, oh, first world problems, then really what I'm doing there is just sweeping it under the rug and going, so I'm not going to face and feel that disappointment. Just because there's other people going through more difficult things. It's like one of the things I always try to do is I always try to like cushion my fall a little bit. I always try to save myself from feeling all of the grief or all of the discomfort in the moment. So I try to come up with all these different ways to justify it away. And it's like, hey, if you would just stop and allow yourself to feel the disappointment and grieve the thing that didn't work out the way you wanted it to, like the past relationship that you thought was going to be the one, but it wasn't. And now deep down, if you're being honest, you still think like, yeah, but maybe. Like once we both figured out maybe, hey, what if it's time just to let that maybe go? What if maybe just turned into no? That one's not going to happen. That one isn't it. It's time to grieve that one and let it go and move on. I know that's some tough love for this Single Today podcast, but if you want to live fully alive today and be ready for what God has for you today, you have to give yourself permission to feel the stuff from yesterday and to let go of it. I remember years ago, I was in Fiji and I got to attend a funeral, and it was a funeral for this older guy who had passed away that a few friends and I had gotten to do a lot of work with, a lot of ministry with and pray for and all that. And we were at the funeral and a whole bunch of, when the family showed up, they just started mourning. And like not the little tears, that we wipe away, like so many of us. That's how we act today. They were like wailing and weeping in a way that was brand new to me, and it almost felt it felt uncomfortable for me. It was a different experience for me, and I'm watching it happen. And as they are like really mourning, I'm trying to like wrap my mind around it. But then what's crazy is a couple hours later, like after the whole funeral, we're having a little like celebration of life afterwards. And everybody who was mourning, like they're just like passing around the food and laughing and telling stories about his life and like honoring him. And they just look so like light and so free. And I'm like, honestly, I'm looking at them like they did a magic trick. Like, how did you do that? Like, my tactic is to usually just like let grief silently destroy me for 2 years while I pretend like everything's fine. Right. But instead, they just faced it head on. They gave themselves space to grieve and to feel. And then like through the other side of that grief, on the other side of that grief was this like lightness to them. Yeah, because it's so important to allow ourselves to actually feel the disappointment. It's so important to allow ourselves to actually feel the sadness. That stuff is so heavy to carry around. If we just let it go through us, we let it run its course, we let it do what it does. And by the way, there's no time limit to it. So much of that stuff is like out of our control, right? But if we let it do what it's meant to do, there's always new life on the other side of it. So, got to name it. You got to name the disappointment. Then you got to allow yourself to feel the disappointment. Give yourself space to feel the disappointment. Then step 3 is let it teach you. It's never easy to go through something difficult, but pain is never pointless. There's always something for you to learn through the process. Single people, listen to me. Disappointment can be one of the most powerful teachers. Disappointment can be one of the most powerful teachers. It teaches you so much about what to do, but often about what not to do. And so if you will allow yourself, give yourself space to name it and then space to feel it. Like the next thing you can do is allow that thing to teach you. Here's a great question to ask as you're going through disappointment. Did I set realistic expectations? Or am I disappointed right now because I set the bar and set the standard way too high to a place that I was never going to be able to succeed, or another person was never going to be able to succeed. And now I'm disappointed in the fact that I just set unrealistic expectations. So maybe my expectations for who I am, or if it's in the context of dating, who the person I'm looking for, maybe those expectations are unrealistic. Maybe those need to be rethought, readjusted. Or how about this one? Should I change the way I said or did something next time? Like if it's a relationship that you're trying to move on from, is there something that you said? Is there something that you did that you go, hey, actually, I can learn a lot from the way that I handled this, that, or the other. And maybe next time I should do that this way. Or maybe next time I should look for this in a person before I pursue a relationship further with them. See, disappointment is never fun, but my goodness, it can be a very helpful teacher. I'll say it this way. Disappointment is an incredibly efficient way to learn what doesn't work. And so like so much of life is trying to figure it out. And the best way to do that is often to learn what doesn't work. Disappointment is an incredibly efficient way to do that. It teaches you what not to do real quick. It teaches you what not to look for real quick. And so again, I'm not trying to soften the disappointment. In fact, go back to step 2. I want you to feel it all. I also want you to learn through the process. One of the keys to dealing with disappointment is to let it teach you. Then step 4 is to give grace. This is a big one. Like if you are feeling disappointment because someone else hurt you, it's really easy just to stay angry with that person instead of feeling your own disappointment. Say that again. It's so much easier just to get angry with that person than it is to allow yourself and give yourself space to feel your own disappointment. And so one of the first things you have to do, well, the fourth thing you have to do, I guess, is to give that person grace. You can let that person off the hook. If you can forgive that person, then you'll be freed up to name and feel your own disappointment. But you'll never deal with your own disappointment as long as you are just making that other person the enemy. And how about this? Maybe for some of you, that person you have to give grace to is yourself. You'll never deal with your own disappointment as long as you are remaining angry with yourself, as long as you are feeling ashamed with yourself, as long as you are allowing fear to continue to call the shots in your life. You have to let yourself off the hook. Let yourself off the hook and you'll realize, oh, I am feeling disappointed right now. Then it'll be so much easier to allow yourself to name that disappointment and feel that disappointment. I was recording a podcast. I do a podcast called Afterthoughts with my friends Doug and Ethan, and we talk about we debrief our sermon from the weekend at Red Rocks Austin and talk through it all. And this week we were recording one on spiritual warfare, and Ethan said something so profound. He used an illustration of say you have a neighbor who you don't like, who you don't get along with. And then one morning you wake up and you realize that they just got robbed and there's cops there and the whole deal. Like in that moment, you're not thinking, man, I really don't like them. You're thinking, oh, like I hate that. Is there anything I can do to like help you? Can I take you out to dinner? I'm so sorry that happened to you last night, right? All of a sudden you have way more sympathy and empathy for them because you realize that they are fighting a battle that you really knew nothing about. Well, the same thing is true with spiritual warfare. And his point was everybody on planet Earth is fighting a battle, and everybody has a spiritual enemy that's coming after them. And when you start to realize that about other people, it becomes a lot easier to forgive and to give people grace, right? What's the quote? It's a famous quote. I'm going to get it wrong here, but be kind because everybody you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. I think I got that right. Somewhere along those lines, but it's true, right? So that person that's involved in the disappointment that you're feeling, the next step is to give them grace. And if you want the best way to do that, Jesus tells us is, you've heard it said, love your enemies, but love your friends, but hate your enemies. I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Best way to do that, the quickest way to do that is just to start praying for them. Lord, I pray for my ex. Lord, I bless that person who disappointed me. Whatever the story is, you start praying for that person. You just start to watch how that bitterness starts to lose its grasp on you. And so if you're having a hard time dealing with disappointment, try giving grace to the other person involved. And then the fifth step is simply this: you got to get back in the game. Step 5, get back in the game, whatever the game is for you. Again, if this is a Single Today podcast, if you are dealing with disappointment from a past relationship, and you are just like sitting around and thinking and overthinking and overthinking and overthinking, yes, you have to go through the first 4 steps. You got to name it. You got to give yourself space to feel it. You got to learn from it. You got to give grace to the other person, but eventually you got to get back in the game. I still remember the day that I learned my dad taught me how to ride my bike without my training wheels, because it was a painful day. Right? I had a lot of scrapes from that day, but every time I fell, he just kept picking me back up, telling me to keep going. And the thing is, like, I learned real quick what not to do. And so before you know it, I was able to ride because I learned all these lessons about what not to do. But if I had just given up as I'm laying there, knees starting to bleed and scrapes on my elbows and all of that, then I never would have learned. Like, what my dad knew is I was closer than I thought to getting this. I just got to get back in the game. Got to get back in the game. So I don't know who that is for, but I just feel like this week, my job, my assignment was to teach us how to deal with disappointment. And that the last piece of that is, once you go through steps 1 through 4, step 5 is to get back in the game. And so, quick review as we land the plane. Step 1, name the disappointment, and don't be vague. Like, be as detailed as you know how to be. Name that disappointment. And then step 2, give it space. Allow yourself to feel the disappointment. Like, don't just name it up here in your head. Open up your heart and allow yourself to feel the disappointment that comes with it, to grieve, to be sad, to be disappointed. Then step 3, as you do that, let the disappointment teach you. Teach you what not to do, teach you what not to look for, teach you how to move forward. And then step 4 is to give grace to the other people or person involved, including yourself. And then step 5 is time to get back in the game. And so what I'm feeling right now, just to land this plane, is I want to pray a prayer of blessing over anyone that this is speaking to right now. And so if you will, if it's safe right now, close your eyes. Don't close your eyes if you're driving or running. I can't close my eyes when I'm running. Sorry, I'm getting off track. If it's safe for you right now to close your eyes. And I want to pray a prayer of blessing over the person who is experiencing disappointment. Father, we love you. We thank you for today. Lord, even for the single person today who is feeling very disappointed, we want to pray in the name of Jesus that you would give them permission to name that disappointment, that you would let them know that you are there in it with them, that you can handle their disappointment, that you can handle their anger, that you can handle them saying, hey, I'm disappointed right now in faith because I thought that I've prayed for my future person so many times. I thought by now I would have it and I'm disappointed. Lord, would you remind them that that is a pure and good prayer to pray? Lord, right now in this moment, I pray that you would give them the space that they need to feel it, or that they would feel the sadness, they would feel the anger, they would feel the disgust, whatever it is, Lord, that they would allow themselves space to grieve in this moment. Father, I pray that if there's any lesson that they need to learn for next time, that they would learn that through their disappointment right now, that you would remind them disappointment can be a powerful teacher. And Father, of course, you say that we're to forgive others the way that you have forgiven us. And we love that you have forgiven us, but the forgiving others part can be tricky. With us, it's impossible. But with you, all things are possible. So would you empower us right now to forgive, to give grace to that person who disappointed us, who let us down? Not just that cheap forgiveness, but a deep heart level, soul level forgiveness. And then, Father, when the time is right, I pray that you would give the person listening strength and grace and permission to get back in the game, to move forward again, that today is a new day, and that this single today journey is not for the faint of heart, but that they can step up and step into the abundant life that you have for them today. So whatever get back in the game means for them, I pray that you would remind them that you have a plan for their life, that you have a purpose for their life, and that they have permission to be proactive and get back in the game today. In Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. This is episode 15, Dealing with Disappointment.